Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is the blockchain backer bringing you the latest cryptocurrency news and analysis. Today, we'll look over here at the altcoin market. We'll peek over there at the Bitcoin price chart, and we'll take a macro look at the markets as we're getting near the end of the year. It's actually just today and tomorrow as trading days left in the United States stock market. And I think for a lot of us, we'll be able to say, hey, good riddance to 2022. It was one of those rough years in not only crypto, but broader markets. We, of course, have seen these types of years before. We saw this in 2014 and we saw this in 2018. But I think we're all ready to just say goodbye to 2022. Somehow, some way, still just 4-year separations of these awful years. But hey, at least history, want to look to optimism and hope for the future. Typically, by the time these year periods of just torture are over, things start to settle down. Even if we look at 2014 and 2018 compared to our current time that we're in right now, we've now gone longer than the 2018 bear and the 2014 bear. So if there is still another capitulative move to come in Bitcoin, a lot of people looking for $11,000, $12,000, $13,000 Bitcoin, it would officially make it the longest bear in history. One could argue, hey, you know what? It just makes sense. These things, they can just get longer and longer and longer. But that actually isn't the case for what happened for Bitcoin in here. Actually, this one right here, this one that ended earlier, this was actually 2018. This one right here was 2014. So there's no real direct correlation of saying that as time goes on, the bears get longer and longer. If anything, 2018's bear was shorter than 2014's. But either way, by the time a full year had elapsed, pretty much the bulk of it was over. 2014 did have that little final move that happened there in the beginning of January. But like we mentioned, with time had already elapsed and we're kind of past that. So we'll see how that goes. Other things we've looked at in regards to time for like the altcoin market would be like Litecoin and how much time it has spent in this bear. And we can see that currently right now we've gone well beyond the amount of time for the 2014 bear and for the 2018 bear in here. Swap the color on that. We'll zoom in a little bit to see, hey, enough time has already well elapsed for that to be completed. We've seen a lot of similar price action down here for Litecoin as well. Even if we want to just shift over here, as we know, a lot of people are pointing to, Bitcoin did set a new high here in November of 2021. So did Ethereum. But we know a lot of the altcoin market was back here in April and May. But even in those circumstances, we've now gotten to the elapsed time, even for Litecoin, if we want to just pretend that was the top, which we know it wasn't. The top was back over here. But even if we use that one, boy, we're way past time for this thing to wrap itself up. So rough year for sure, but not just Litecoin. Even looking over here at Ethereum's bear from 2018, you can see how long it took for Ethereum to find its bottom. Doesn't matter which one of these we use. We could see we are past the amount of time elapsed for a bear to be completed in here. So should there be further breaking down in here like we're talking about the longest bear in history from a time perspective. But New Year's are about hope, about optimism, about a fresh start. And boy, I think we're all ready to just put this one behind us. But I do go into it with more optimism than I did going into 2022. As we were going into 2022, the thoughts were that Bitcoin was going into a bear market. Of course, there were a lot of surprises along the way. We didn't see big bounces. We didn't see big runs in the altcoin market. We saw catastrophic things happen in the cryptocurrency market, such as Luna and UST collapsing, and BlockFi, Celsius, Three Arrows Capital, FTX. What's going on with Digital Currency Group and the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust? A lot of things have been washed out in this market in 2022. While what appeared to be, when we were ending 2021, was the completion of a super cycle. And for those who remember, when we were starting 2022, ending 2021, we were saying, man, we are printing what looks just like a bear market fractal from the very top of Bitcoin. And if this thing is to continue playing out, the thing that it shows heading for the future is not that great. Obviously, the element that never showed up was a big old retrace. But when we were heading into 2022, the thought process was, regardless of a retrace, Bitcoin's in a bear market. And well, as we come to a conclusion of the year, look where we just so happen to be. We finally have completed all of it. We've gotten down the depths of what all of that would end up being. And so when I go back and I think, hey, what was it like as we were getting ready to start 2022 and what were things, was it optimistic looking heading into 2022? No, not so much. There was still a lot of fear that was headed there, even though the market was still optimistic that Bitcoin wasn't in a bear market. It was looking at this stuff saying, hey, this doesn't look so hot, man. And even to my surprise, plays out insanely well. And here we are at the end of the year. Finally, we're all the way down there. So while we're beaten up, we're all licking our wounds. We're like, man, this year was tough. At least heading into the next year, and I'll be the first to admit, 2023, it's not like a crystal clear picture of what's coming in 2023. But when we were heading into 2022, this was our picture. Now, what does all of this look like heading up in here? Picture's not so clear, but this was ugly. And when we start 2023, this is where we get to begin at. Will the super cycles take hold once again for Bitcoin? One thing we've looked at for Ethereum has been its entire run that it had back in here and how impressive it was that even Ethereum appears to have been doing somewhat of its same super cycle from the same levels as we saw happening with Bitcoin. Even the peak came in at the same location of Ethereum's past cycle. So are we about to see an epic 2023? I'm not going to sell you that hopium, but it's important to remember where we were as we were going into 2022, that we were going in looking really ugly. Now the damage has been done. This is where all the laser eyes are gone, all the diamond hands are gone. But now it's the big moment to see, is crypto going to do as it typically does, where it comes into a recovery? We've completed what is the typical amount of time and pain before recoveries start to take place. Or are we in big gloom and doom and the thing's going to break down and it's just going to be really bad for a very long time? That's kind of where we get to go into 2023 at. Either we're on top of supports, the altcoin market's right where it should be, Ethereum's at a point of where it's ready to go for a turn to the upside after a typical correction from this location, and Bitcoin's done with this whole bear structure that we saw from the very beginning of the year and even into the end of 2021. So this was what we were looking at going into this year. Now, if we want to tack more on this and just say, hey, we're going to do it all over again, okay, that's cool and all, but this is what we had going. So I do find more optimism starting a fresh year, knowing that this is what we were looking at going into 2022, knowing that these things last about a year, they're 4 years apart. We've elapsed more time than we have in 2014 and in 2018. And most of these altcoins show the same story, right? And of course, there's a big mix out there on the altcoins as well. You have a lot of them who have held their lows since June. And then you have some that are just showing exceptional weakness on their own. If you go through the list over here, I'd say it's about half of them that are still holding those June lows. And then the other half that is just like, hey, we're super weak. Ones that are still holding June would be Uniswap, Ethereum Classic, Cosmos, Ethereum, Quaint, Litecoin, Binance Coin, Chainlink, Doge, SHIB, Matic, Monero, and XRP. That's about 40% of them. But all of that really ties back to over here, looking at the altcoin market as well, as it's holding on top of its all-time high as we head into the new year. And that yearly candle gives us a pretty good taste of what has happened in here. After 2018 was a pull down, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, right back to the all-time high. But if that thing does it, if that thing double taps the all-time high and goes, I'm going to expect to see Golden Combo get sold out because, as we know over the years, double tap on top of the all-time high. But as we sit here on top of this all-time high, waiting to see what direction we're going to go in and whether Ethereum is merely completing the final portion for a big turn up in this market happens. Of course, we all know the big thing that has happened out there in broader markets has been what's going on with the US stock market, US dollar currency index, and with treasury yields. There really hasn't been that drastic of a crash, per se, happening over here in the Dow Jones Industrial Average, but the big question looms on whether or not is it going to begin one, and how long can it stay in this area before something does end up happening. If we want to conceptually think about bills and bonds and treasury yields, and why would these things matter, right? So why would a 4.7% treasury yield on a 1-year government bond matter? Well, 4.7%. So when people invest in the US stock market, they go into it with the idea of 6 to 8% returns per year. But if there's worry about markets, if there's concerns about markets, and if they're too risky right now, where can people put their money to still get something close to that, but not have to be exposed to the risk? And right now, that's US Treasury yields. So on a 1-year yield, you can get 4.7%. On a 6-month yield, you can get 4.57% rates. Now, if we look at how the whole year has been for 2022, massive upward trajectory, and suddenly we've started to stall out. The question is, will these things actually roll over, making it less appealing to put your money into safety of US Treasuries, as even the 1-month Treasury yield has a rate of 3.58%. As several banks are now starting to offer interest rates or APYs over here on savings accounts right now, usually in the 3 to 4%. The list is actually quite long of what banks and institutions have savings rates of 3 to 4% with no term, just putting it into a savings account and earning an APY. While places like Wells Fargo still offer next to nothing, along with Bank of America and Chase with 0.01%. But the trend is changing, and we're starting to see these banks offer savings account rates once again. Now, there is complexity when it comes to rates and trying to interpret that into charts. You look back in here and you say, hey, look, this is November of 2018 where rates actually turned over, and we could see it grinding all the way down here through 2019, and then we get all the way down to next to zero in March of 2020. But here we are, we've turned around, we've already gone all the way back down to zero. And even though that happened, still crypto was sitting way down here at the low. So to just interpret a reversal in rates is hard to do, because even the rise in rates in 2017 to 2018 was actually the whole bull run, which we can see right in here in 2015, 16, and 17, that even though rates are rising, crypto goes on a massive bull run into that rate rise. So not a perfect inverse relationship to be able to interpret there. But when it comes to the Federal Reserve interest rate hiking cycle, we know going into 2023 that the last rate hike of 2022 was different than all of the rate hikes leading up to that, in which the Fed was playing catch up to the 10-year and to the 2-year Treasury yields, this time continuing further beyond the 10-year and even bypassing the 2-year slightly, which the 2-year has now gotten in line with the federal funds rate, which is 4.25 to 4.5%, while the 10-year still sits about 0.5% below what the federal funds rate is. So the Fed has run out of room to be aggressive with rate hikes. So as we start the new year, we see that the DXY has made a dramatic turnaround. The Fed has run out of room to be aggressive with rate hikes, and our bear market fractal that we've been looking at since the end of 2021 and early 2022 has gone full distance. The big looming question out there is, does the altcoin market continue to hold the all-time high? And do we continue to remain tied to the stock market, which, as we saw in absolute dramatic fashion, that all of 2022, a near perfect correlation to the Dow Jones Industrial Average on every swing in each direction, that we did see a disconnect happen right here for the first time all year as FTX collapsed. But as we get ready for the new year, we know where we are. We know where we started the year. What do you know? This is exactly where we end up at the end of the year. Will this time be different? Will it be the longest bear in the history of all time? We'll definitely find that out in 2023. But for me, certainly good riddance to 2022, and I'm welcoming 2023 with open arms. And while I know this has been a rough year, and I've been through rough years before, 2018 was brutal. It's always nice to look through history, see how things have played out before, where we are currently, and to look towards the future. It's time to close this chapter of our lives of 2022. And then when the next time things turn way up, we all have the story to tell. And it's one of those experiences you do carry with you. When we were, at the top of Bitcoin in 2021, I had been in Bitcoin since, 2017. I was buying the bottom in 2018. I remember all these moments that we're living in right now in 2022 as if we were in 2018. And watching Bitcoin go from $3,000 to over $60,000, you live that. You say, man, I've been through all these horrific experiences of these bear markets, thinking it would never come back and never return, but having faith that it would and buying into the extreme depths of despair. And then watching things turn up and go up thousands of percent. And you're like, wow. And you remember these moments. You remember where nobody's willing to buy anything, that the mainstream media is just trash talking crypto. And then things eventually come back and suddenly everybody's piling in. And your long lost sister-in-law or your brother from another mother is texting you and saying, hey, I'm buying Dogecoin. You're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, we're finally in this massive bubble, and then these people are buying, and they weren't here during the really bad times. And this is just those experiences you carry with you through these market cycles. And I know these years are tough. They suck. They're part of the game. But here we are. Let's carry some optimism into the new year. But all right, guys. That's going to be it for this one. I'd actually spent all day recording yesterday, and then I told this story in my video that just kind of like soured my mood, and I wasn't able to get my tone right on my video yesterday. And so I just ended up scratching it, and I posted that here on Twitter, and I posted that over there in the community tab here on YouTube. But I get asked a lot, how do I remain optimistic during times like these? And especially remaining optimistic during 2019, and especially after C19 happened there in 2020, remaining optimistic that things would turn around eventually. And it's just a lot of my life experiences that I've gone through. And in that video, I was telling some stories about some rainbow babies that I have. And I just don't think I'm really ready to tell those stories yet. But I've definitely gone through some really tough times, and I know a lot of you have gone through situations like that before, and you do eventually pull out of them by having faith and moving forward. And I've almost been sober for 10 years at this point, but it doesn't mean that my life is perfect in every way. I still deal with a lot of tragedies in life, like everybody does, and I don't share a lot of those tragedies that I have to go through with my YouTube channel. But I have found that having faith in God, and just continuing to plug away and keep going has always paid dividends for me in my whole life. It's always been about keep going, keep marching forward, keep plugging forward, and it's always paid off. Quitting and being defeated is never in the cards for me because I always have faith that my story is not written that way. My story is written with success. The purpose of my life is to not come into this world and be defeated by the world, but to be the grand champion. It doesn't mean life doesn't knock me down onto the ground and rack that count up to nearly 10 for a knockout. Sometimes it gets to 9 or 9.5, but I still stand back up because the story is not written of me getting knocked out. The story is of me being the one dishing the knockout blow. But sometimes it doesn't happen in beautiful fashion. Sometimes you go down with a black eye, a busted up lip, and you may look a little wobbly by the time you get to the end. But I've had too many miracles performed in my life by having faith and continuing to plow forward to ever have a negative attitude. I'll have my slip-ups here and there, but the story is written in greatness. And so long as I have that faith that that's how my story is written, I tend to find things fall into place much more than not. So, a rough year? You better believe it. Is 2023 around the corner? Yeah, dang right. So, optimism of 2023, good riddance of 2022. I'm grateful we're going into 2023 with, yes, still some uncertainty out there when we look at the whole macro picture of everything tied together, but definitely not how we were looking as we were finishing 2021, heading into 2022. So, cheers to that. But all right, guys. That's going to be it for this one. I hope that you're doing well. I hope that you're having a good week. It's hard to get back into the groove after having the break, but that's also what's great about New Year's, right? New Year's resolutions, revived energy, a sense of wanting to complete accomplishments. So shaking off those couple extra pounds that were added on from Christmas, time to get back to the weights. Just kidding. I never skip the gym. But all right, that's it. I'm wrapping it up. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you could, please like this video and give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you could be notified of when I create new content and when I go live. As always, this is not investment advice and I am not a financial advisor. But if you ever need a pick-me-up or a little bit of reassurance, just remember that the blockchain backers got your back. Have a good one.